أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المظلومين واللعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فأقم وجهك للدين حنيفة فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها لا تبديل لخلق الله ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. صلوات على محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Tonight is our fourth lecture on freeing the butterfly within. Last night we concluded that when a human being is driven by his animal instinct, by what we call tabi'ah, then he seeks reward for all that he does. And he is driven by fear. As opposed to this, if a person is driven by his divine instinct, by his true human nature, by his fitrah, then he overcomes the fear of death. We also said that such a human being is not driven by fear or greed. And when this fitrah reveals itself, when it awakens fully, it comes about instantaneously. It happens suddenly. We prepare the ground, and then an incident in our life, a miracle we witness, or a calamity befalls us, and that brings about this instantaneous enlightenment, a shattering of the ego. Now, oftentimes when we talk about fear and greed, we attribute this directly to human nature. For example, we often say our stock markets are driven by fear and greed, isn't it? When there is fear, people sell. When there is greed, people buy. And we say this is human nature. What we will attempt to see tonight is that is not human nature. That is actually the animal nature within us. That is that nature within us that fights for survival. That is that nature within us that wants to flee from pain. That is the nature within us that seeks pleasure. It is for this reason that you hear time and again that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he never fled from the battlefield. Everyone fled, but he did not flee. Even in the most difficult of times, in the hardest of circumstances. Why? Because he was an enlightened being. He was not driven by fear or greed. He had transcended that bound. Death was not something he was afraid of. When Muawiyah wrote to him and said to him, O son of Abi Talib, I will bring an army with me from Damascus and fight you. Read Nahjul Balagha, what the Imam wrote back to him. He said, O son of Abu Sufyan, are you threatening me with death? By Allah, the son of Abu Talib is more at ease with death than a baby is with the bosom of its mother. These are the words of Imam Ali in Nahjul Balagha. He is telling Muawiyah, don't scare me with death. I am beyond death. If anything, his desire was martyrdom. He kept crying for that. At Badr, at Uhud, when you read the books of Tariq, he kept coming to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and saying, Ya Rasulullah, why did I not get shahada? Why did I not get martyred? And the Prophet kept promising him, you will get martyrdom. And his words when he attained it was what? Fuztu wa Rabbil Kaaba. He didn't say it when he killed Marhab. He didn't say it when he defeated anyone. But when he was slain and attained martyrdom, he said, now I have achieved what I was waiting for. Fuztu wa Rabbil Kaaba. We shall talk about martyrdom perhaps in the later nights. So when this shift happens within a human being and he moves from tabi'ah to fitra. He moves from that worm-like state to that caterpillar-like state. Not only does the ego shatter, but his perception of reality changes. All illusions and all fears fall apart. He sees truth with his entire being. It is not just an intellection or a mental process, but it is something he witnesses with his entire being. And there is a complete disidentification with the body, just like we saw yesterday with the magicians of Fir'aun. They transcended not only the fear of death, but even the fear of torture. You can amputate our limbs, you can torture us, you can crucify us. La dair, inna ila rabbina munqalibun. There is no harm. It doesn't do nothing to us. We are going back to our Lord. This metamorphosis, this enlightenment, when it comes, it also changes, it doesn't just change our perception of reality or our perception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it also changes our perception of our own self, as well as our perception of life itself. Suddenly the things that we saw as being real and solid sometimes appear to be shadows and illusions. We see there is another thing behind them that is more real than this which appears to be real. And not only that, but a lot of the things that we saw as obstacles between ourselves and our Lord, they begin to vanish. Many of us are concerned with our spiritual growth by the grace of Allah, which is a good thing. We pray, we fast, we do our wajibat. Over and above that, when we question the purpose of life, we seek higher realms of spirituality. We want to perfect ourselves. And when we do that, we see certain obstacles between ourselves and Allah. If we attain this enlightenment, these obstacles don't have to be removed. These veils do not have to be removed. They simply vanish. They simply disappear. That sense that he is far is no longer there. That is why when the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when he asks Allah, Ya Rabbi, أَأَنْتَ بَعِيدٌ فَأُنَادِيكَ أَمْ قَرِيبٌ فَأُنَاجِيكَ? Are you far, my Lord, so I should call out to you? Or are you near, so I should whisper to you? Should I do dua or should I do munajat? Ad'uka aw unajik? Allah says, Ya Musa, ana jalisun man dhakarani. I am sitting right beside the person who is remembering me. Udu'uni astajib lakum. What a beautiful Lord. You don't have to wait for the doors of the place of worship to open. You don't have to ring a bell to wake up the Lord. You just mention Him, He is there. Udhkurni adhkurukum. That sense of Allah is with me all the time. That is a very empowering feeling. As we have said in the past, when Musa alayhi salam takes Banu Israel away from Egypt and he is trapped on the shores of a sea, and he sees the approaching army of Fir'aun, and they are charging to massacre them. And the people are making their final wishes and saying, we are done, we are finished. There is the sea on this side, there is the raging, charging army. Musa stands alone. He says, Kalla, inna Rabbi ma'i. Never, never, my Lord is with me, He will guide me. And it is only after he says that Allah says to him, O Musa, strike the sea now with your staff. And it splits open, and Allah says, then the waves rose on both sides like two mountains. But it first waited until Musa said, Kalla inna Rabbi ma'i, He is with me all the time. And it is not restricted to Musa. There is a hadith al-Qudsi in which we are told on one occasion the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, because he was Kalimullah, he used to speak to Allah directly. On one occasion, he said, Ya Rabbi. As soon as he said, Ya Rabbi, Allah said, yes, Musa. Immediately, Ya Rabbi, yes, Musa. Now he felt this pleasure that I was responded to so quickly. He said, Ya Rabbi, is this an honor for me only? Or do others have this honor that as soon as they mention you? He said, no, it's not just for you, O Musa. Anyone who detaches himself from everything else but me and calls me, I am right there with them. This is one of the benefits of moving from tabi'ah to fitra and becoming someone who dedicates himself and attaches himself to Allah. There is a mystic who presents this in a very beautiful manner. How, when the ego shatters, you see the world differently. You see everything connected as one. If you pluck a leaf, you feel you are plucking a part of yourself. You see a nur around every creation of Allah. And you see everything ultimately emanates from Allah. And that feeling of Allah is the only reality. He describes this as follows. He says, when we seek spirituality, we are like human beings who see a mountain of sand in front of us that obstructs us between us and our Lord. So every morning we take a little spoon or a shovel and we keep taking out a little bit of the sand to remove that mountain between us and Allah. And we keep doing that day after day after day. Then one day, when that enlightenment comes to us, when that ego shatters, when we come out of that chrysalis, that cocoon, we wake up and realize that in reality there was no mountain at all. We were digging at an illusion. And the most beautiful thing is that the same idea is given to us in the Quran as well. In Surah An-Nur, which is chapter 24 of the Quran, verse 39, Allah gives us an example. He says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَسَرَابٍ بِقِيعَةٍ. Those who are faithless, their actions are like a mirage in a plain. يَحْسَبُهُ الظَّمْآنُ مَاءً. The one who is thirsty, he thinks there is water where there is the mirage. There is that illusion, there is the thing that will make him happy. He thinks that is what is there. حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَهُ لَمْ يَجِدْهُ شَيْئًا. Until he comes to that mirage, he finds that in reality there is nothing there. وَوَجَدَ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ. Instead he finds Allah is waiting for him there. فَيُوَفِّيهِ حِسَابَهُ وَاللَّهُ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. So Allah takes him to account for his deeds, and Allah is swift in reckoning. So we make a choice, my dear brothers and sisters. We either accept that we have a divine reality in us that has to be awakened, and we search for our Lord and we find Him and evolve spiritually and let that metamorphosis occur within us before we die and transcend the fear of death while we are still in our physical bodies. Or we continue with our animal instinct. We continue to be driven by fear and greed. We continue being deluded that this avatar, this alien body is the real me. We continue being obsessed with materialism, with decorating this body, with decorating our world, with pretending this world is real and permanent and I'm not going to die, with hope after hope I will be alive tomorrow, until death comes to me. And then I wake up to something frightening, to something shocking. What is it that is shocking? The fact that I never evolved, that I remained the caterpillar, I remained the worm. I never really allowed my potential to awaken within me. Now, by this time you are probably thinking, tabi'ah is evil. I need to really avoid this. You do not need to avoid tabi'ah, you need to rein it. We have said this before. We said tabi'ah and fitra are two sides of the same coin. You cannot pluck it out. You need the physical body while you are in this world. It has a purpose. It is a vehicle that is needed for you to evolve spiritually. So let's talk a little bit about why we need tabi'ah. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad. A few reasons. One, of course, what I just mentioned. That the physical experience in this world requires tabi'ah for the evolution of the soul. The suffering that we experience because of interacting with others who are less realized beings, who are ignorant, who are more tabi'ah driven than us, also has a purpose in helping our spiritual evolution. When we have a spouse who is troublesome, when we have children who are troublesome, not through our fault, even though we have done our best, or we have people at work, we have employees, or we have an employer who gives us grief, or we interact with people in society, we meet people on the streets and in the malls who might abuse us, who might insult us, we live in a jungle of our own species, don't we? When we interact with these beings who are more ignorant than we are, or more tabi'ah driven than we are, that conflict is also an opportunity for us to look at ourselves and measure how we are doing spiritually. As an example, I might have this idea in my mind that I am very evolved. People might tell me all the time, you are very patient, you are very kind-hearted. So I now believe that I am very patient and I'm very kind-hearted. And then Allah brings into my life a 2-year-old. And when I interact with him, there are lots of occasions when I lose my cool and I show anger and I lose patience with him. Those moments of conflict that I experience, though it be a child, when I raise my hand and hit the child, that is a moment for me to also measure myself, that I do not have the ability to control my anger. I have not yet reined this force, this animal instinct within me. So all these incidents that we experience in life that are troublesome, in fact have a purpose. And it is for this reason that there is not a single individual in this room who will leave this world without experiencing some form of suffering. And with that, over and above those individual calamities that will befall you, there will be some trial that will be your trial in life. It might be a physical handicap, it might be a troublesome relationship, it might be poverty, it might be anything, but something will plague you. That is your challenge. That is your textbook through which you will learn and evolve if you embrace it instead of running away from it. Okay? This is very, very important that we understand. The mystics understood this a long time. Some of them had a little, a humorous touch to it. There was one Sufi, for example, who had a very troublesome wife. And when people said to him, why do you not divorce this woman? She causes you so much grief. She causes you so much grief. He said, look, if I divorce her, somebody else will marry her, and then he will suffer. So I'm keeping her to protect the other mu'mineen. Okay? Now this was one perspective. But there is another perspective that is even more profound. And this can happen the other way as well, by the way. It is a sister who may have a troublesome husband, and she might keep him to save the other sisters. Okay? But there is another incident like this, which is perhaps more true. There was a man who had a very, very troublesome wife. And when people said to him, why do you not leave her? He said, you see, Allah will not leave anyone without a trial. I know she is my trial. Now I can manage my expectations. If I leave her, I will be tried with something else, but I don't know what. It might be even more difficult than this. So better the devil I know. I'm going to keep her. Okay, so this is one perspective. And again I say this could be the other way around. This is not to say that if you have a husband who abuses you or beats you, that you tolerate abuse. This is not at all what I'm saying. I'm simply giving this as an example to say that there is no individual who will escape suffering. The sooner we accept this idea that life is suffering, that we are here to learn through that suffering, and that suffering has a wisdom and a purpose, the sooner we can begin our journey, our spiritual journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So one of the reasons why we need tabi'ah is that interaction of conflict in this plane of existence that is not perfect helps us evolve spiritually. If we had been born straight in Jannah, it is a perfect environment. That opportunity to evolve would not have been there. Secondly, tabi'ah is also needed because it is a means through which calamities come to us. And as we said, calamities also are a springboard for spiritual evolution. They are also a means through which Allah tries us. The more we increase, we have this in ahadith, there is lots and lots of such ahadith. The more you increase in your faith, the more you are tried. The degree to which a person receives calamities is in proportion to his iman. And there are so many ahadith on this that if I was to begin discussing, I would completely digress from my subject. There is a third reason we need tabi'ah as well. Tabi'ah is needed because it is the instinct that drives the body, and it is directly used by the ego. And the ego is something that the mind created from infancy out of conflict. You will remember that a couple of nights back we said that enlightenment does not come out of being egoless. Enlightenment comes from shattering the ego. The ego has to be created before it is shattered and removed. So you need something that outwardly appears negative to become your journey through which you learn and grow out of and evolve and experience that metamorphosis. You need to be a worm, a caterpillar, and experience the life of a worm and a caterpillar in order to become a butterfly. Now let's give another analogy of our tabi'ah and fitra. We've been giving analogies of a rider and a mount, of a gushing river and a dam and so on. Let's give a few more analogies so that this relationship is understood completely. If I have a young seed or a plant or a sapling, I will not plant it outdoors in winter or in summer, because if I do that, it will die with the cold or with the heat of the sun. I will begin by planting it in a flower pot. I will keep it indoors in a greenhouse, for example. That very same plant, when it begins to bloom and the roots begin to grow, the flower pot now becomes a restriction. It stops it from growing. It is at that point that I break open the flower pot and I take this out and I begin to plant it outdoors so that it grows to its full potential. If I don't do that, it will die. Human beings are the same. Initially, a human being must be nurtured in the pot of tabi'ah. That is why when we are born with our animal instinct, with our tabi'ah, until there is maturity and understanding. Once there is maturity and understanding, the pot of tabi'ah must be broken and exposed to fitra. If that is not done, then the soul will die. So you as a parent, one of your tasks is to be the greenhouse, to give your child that flower pot in which they grow, and then to learn at what point they are ready to now come out of that flower pot and reveal their full potential, when it is time for them to grow out of that restriction. This pot, therefore, protects the sapling, but it is also its prison. With the same analogy, the human body is the same, as we shall see in the coming nights. The human body protects the soul, but it is also the prison of the soul. Remember this statement, that the human body protects the soul while we are in this world, but it is also its prison. We will talk about this again when we come to the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When you come to the hadith in which he says the world is a prison for a believer. We will talk about this inshallah 2 nights from now when we talk about attachments and addictions. Okay? So the human body is a protection, but it is also a restriction. One of the reasons why Allah sends calamities on you, using this analogy, is to break open this flower pot, to bring you out of the greenhouse into the open, so that you can grow into this walnut tree, so that you can grow into this oak tree. It appears to be unfair to us. It makes us insecure, because all our lives we have been warm, we have been cushy in that greenhouse, sitting in that flower pot. Life was good. I had a good job. I had family. I had children. I had a good paycheck. I was healthy. Everything was going well. Why Allah? Why me? Why now? That's the question we ask. What we don't realize is I was in my cocoon. My potential to grow had stopped. My roots could not expand. So I was in the rat race, but I thought life was good. That calamity that befell me, that was the breaking of the flower pot. That was Allah saying to us, no, you're not good. You are running on animal instinct. You are driven by fear and greed. Come out of the greenhouse. Come out into the dark tunnel. Cross and see the light at the other end of the tunnel. Let me show you what your full potential is. So that calamity, therefore, is again an opportunity that brings us to our full potential. When the flower pot shatters through this calamity, then fitra begins to speak. What does fitra say when calamity befalls and the flower pot breaks? Fitra says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. When afflictions and misfortunes befall them, they realize that they are not in control of their lives, that this is not permanent. They say, indeed, we come from Allah and to Him is our return. That statement is filled with realization, but that realization only came إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ. As soon as life appears to be happy, we forget to call to Allah. We forget this inna lillah, because then we go back to our mode of fear and greed. We go back to being driven by tabi'ah, and therefore we go back to being comfortable with how our life was. So Fitra immediately senses that when this flower pot has broken, when something is wrong with my life, the walls of tabi'ah are falling apart. The walls of my ego, the shattering of my ego boundary is taking place. Tabi'ah, on the other hand, says, I am invincible, I will never die, I am a god unto myself, I will live forever. Because tabi'ah doesn't want to leave the cocoon, it does not want to leave the flower pot, it does not want to leave the mode in which it is happy. Now, let me very quickly give you another analogy that will make this actually very clear as well. We all have heard of great Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Socrates and Plato. Now, Plato has a book called The Republic. In his book, The Republic, he has a beautiful analogy. It's a fictitious one, which you can Google actually. Google Plato's cave, or the analogy of the cave, or the allegory of the cave, and you will see this story. He makes up a fictitious story to show human behavior. He says, let us suppose there is a cave that is underground, and in this cave there are human beings who have lived all their lives as prisoners. These human beings are kept facing a blank wall. They are tied and chained in their hands and their feet, and there is a collar on their neck which prevents them from moving their head to either side. They can only look at the blank wall in front of them. Okay? Behind them there is a fire that has been lit a little far away. Between their backs and the fire, people sometimes pass by. These are people who are not prisoners. And as they pass, and as objects pass between them and the fire casts shadows of those people and those objects on the wall that is in front of them. So all they see is the shadows in front of them. All their lives they sit there, and the only thing they see are these shadows. Sometimes those people talk, but because it is a cave, they hear echoes, which are distorted sounds. These prisoners, their perception of reality will only be those shadows, those distorted images on the wall. That is all they will know to be reality. Eventually, as time passes, they will begin to give names to those shadows. They will begin noticing that some shadows look the same all the time, because the same human beings are passing, or the same objects. A horse passes, a camel passes. So they will start giving names to those objects and saying, this object is called this object is called that. Just like we name things in this world and say, this is a tree, this is a horse, this is a camel. Okay. Now, this becomes their perception of reality. Then they create a hierarchy and a chain amongst them. Those who are very smart at naming these things, those who can study these shadows more carefully, those who can name them quicker than the others, they are conferred certain honors. They are told, you have a master's degree in reality. You have a master's or a PhD on shadows. They don't know these are shadows. To them, this is the world. This is reality. Now, this is Plato's analogy. And there is actually an animated clip to show this whole thing in 8 minutes if you want to watch it online. A man now comes into the cave, who in our analogy would be a prophet from Allah. He comes and he frees one of the prisoners. He removes the chains and the collar from him. He allows him to walk around the cave for a bit. The man now looks around and he realizes this is not the only thing that was real. There was other things that were more real. He looks at the fire, he looks at these objects. The prophet who comes, he tells this man that, look, what you have been looking at is just shadow, that's not reality, this is reality. Now all his life he has only known this to be reality, so he denies this. He says, no, wait a minute. This is reality. How do you know this is reality? He says, well, don't you see when these things move, then you see images there? He says, but how is this coming about? He says, well, the fire. But how is fire causing shadow? He doesn't understand this. So the prophet takes his hand and says, come with me outside the cave. He resists because it is a world he does not know. The prophet takes him by force to the open world. Initially, when he sees the sun, it totally blinds him. He cannot bear to see the light. He has never seen nur. He has only known dhulumat. He can't understand what is happening. He is left in this real world for a bit. Now he begins to discover this world. He sees flowers growing. He sees animals. He sees shadows in this world as well. He sees reflections in the water from the real object. He begins to see the meaning of reflection. He sees shadows from the sun. He begins to see how shadows work. His perception changes. He ultimately begins to realize that the only thing that is of most essential nature here is the sun. It is the sun that is causing the plants to grow. It is the sun that is keeping these animals alive. It is the sun that is casting all these shadows that people think is reality. In our analogy, this reality, this sun would be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, at some point, his nature will say to him, my God, all my people are in the cave. They think those shadows are the real world. What will they do if they find out this is the real world? So he is very happy and he goes back down into the cave to tell them about this. Well, guess what happens? He cannot see the shadow properly, first of all. Everything looks distorted. The darkness is hurting, is skewing the things because he's now used to the real world. And so they start laughing at him. They say, so you thought you were the smart one, right? You went to seek truth and knowledge. Now you can't even see the truth properly here, right? So he's talking to them, trying to convince them. They jeer him, they mock him, they laugh at him, that you are mad. What are these things you're talking about? These things are not real. They cannot even move their head, so that's the only thing they're seeing. So what he now tries to do is, he tries to open their chains. He says, come, let me show you. Well, guess what happens? They get angry, they get violent, they push him away. Just because you are mad, you want us to be mad? Go away. This is reality. We don't want this from you. And if he was to insist, they would kill him. If he was to open up their chains, they would pounce upon him and kill him because he is forcing them out of the cocoon. He is forcing them out into the open world. He is breaking their flower pot. They don't want that. Yet his consciousness will not allow him to leave those people sitting in the cave facing a blank wall believing the shadows is reality. So to him, he would rather risk being killed than not say the truth. It is for this reason that our species always opposed the prophets when they first came and we killed them. When the Anbiya came to us, what did they come to tell us? They came to tell us, your understanding of this world is not real. You are driven by animal instinct. Come, let us show you your fitra. Come out of the cave. Come through the tunnel. Come out of the cocoon. Come out of the greenhouse. Break the flower pot. We resist. Instead, what did we say to them? We said, لَإِن لَمْ تَنْتَهُ Surah Yasin, chapter 36, verse 18. لَإِن لَمْ تَنْتَهُ لَنَرْجُمَنَّكُمْ وَلَيَمَسَّنَّكُمْ مِنَّا عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. If you do not stop doing what you are doing, preaching to us and telling us about all these things, we will stone you and you will receive a grievous punishment from us. This was the natural, not the natural, but the tendency of human beings who never knew the truth. This is what the prophets wanted to show us. But we resisted because they're telling us to come out of tabi'ah, to come out of this cocoon. And therefore we hear that we say that he who fears to lose sight of the shores will never discover new lands. If you're always holding on to what is familiar, when will you see that which Allah has placed for you to see, that which is part of your journey and your destiny to realize your full potential? So when we realize, when we restrict ourselves, when we say, I don't want to come out of my animal nature, I want to fulfill my desires, I want to be driven by my animal instinct, I'm happy living a life driven by fear and greed, I don't want all these matters of spirituality. Not only is there the danger of the shock and the fright at the time of death, when our egos collapse forcibly and we are forcefully taken out of our cocoons, but we also prevent ourselves from realizing our full potential. Now, I want to take 5 or 10 minutes more. I know I have exhausted you mentally with all these examples and analogies, but I want to take just 5 more minutes of your time before I come to an end for tonight to explain to you what I mean, just to give you an example that we might be able to relate to, how we limit our potentials when we refuse to be fitra-driven creatures and we insist on being tabi'ah-driven creatures. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala محمد وآل محمد. Let us take an example. We all have different positions at work, at the community, and so on. I'll take a simple example. Let us suppose I start volunteering at this center, and I volunteer to look after the shoe racks outside, because I don't think anybody does that right now. So just take that as an example. And I do that for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And I perfect it as an art. I make it a really, I bring it down to a fine art. I have rules, regulations, leather shoes go on top, runners, second rack, flip-flops down, if you have winter boots down, arranged by color, by size, it's all perfect. Everyone who comes here thanks me, praises me, acknowledges me. And I truly believe I am doing this for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I am doing it to serve his guests who come to listen to his majlis. And I'm totally, convinced that this is my reasoning. Now, after I've done that for 15, 20 years, this young lad comes about and he starts questioning how I do things. He says, why don't we move these shelves a little bit like this or that? So initially I'll tell him, you know what, just move along. Okay, I've been doing this for 20 years. Don't teach me my job. But he insists, no, I think we can make this better. We can put in extra 4 shelves at the top. Maybe we don't have to be so particular about arranging it by color. He goes to the Jamaat, he speaks to them, he comes back. Now I feel threatened. What is this man doing? He's taking away something that is my job, that is my responsibility. Okay? So my first response is, I will start backbiting. I'll go home, I'll talk to my spouse. You won't believe what happened today. There's this, silly idiot fellow coming about now, questioning how I arrange shoes, trying to take over my position, right? Then I will start talking about him to anyone and everyone who will listen. My belief was what? I'm doing this for Imam Hussein, okay? But what I'm trying to show you here is how we limit our potential. So then I go to the Jamaat and I say, look, this is not right. But instead, I'm surprised that they don't support me. They support the other guy and saying, well, maybe you should listen to him. Maybe he's got a point, right? So now I'm opposed to that as well, that, oh my God, these guys are really trying to, my position is threatened. So now I start acting against and I start threatening and distorting things. What I might do perhaps is, if the majlis is going on, I might start, talking loudly just to disrupt things, or matam, I'll just talk loudly, do something like that, or maybe rearrange the shoes so that people can't find their shoes, just so people know that they can't do this without me. Okay? Well, that doesn't work as well. Life seems to go on. So then I come to the Jamaat and I say, you know what, I quit. You guys, look after the shoes yourself. I'm not coming anymore. I'm out of here. Well, that doesn't work as well because life goes on. People still come to the mosque. So now I start discouraging people outside and I say, you really shouldn't go to Masumin Islamic Center. I mean, you should see the mess in the shoe rack. Nobody, it's terrible. You really shouldn't go there. Okay? Well, that doesn't work. So then I go to another center and I say, do you need someone to look after your shoes? I'm a really good shoe keeper. I've got like 20 years experience. Here's my resume, right? What am I doing here? This is not a bad experience. We all experience this in our lives at some point. It is not bad. Why? Because at this point now, I can look at myself in the mirror and realize that I was not doing this for Imam Hussein. I was doing it for myself. I reveal myself to myself. But when did I learn to realize that I was nothing but a shoe keeper for my ego? Not even, if I was a shoe keeper for Imam Hussein, nuran ala nur. But I was a shoe keeper for my ego. When did I realize this? When the issue of losing status, losing power. Remember the magicians? They asked Fir'aun, "Inna lana la ajran in kunna nahnu al-ghalibun." Will we have a reward if we win over Musa? He said, yes, and you will have position. Wa innakum idhan lamina al-muqarrabin. You will be the most closest people to me. Shaitan also thought he was the most sincere worshipper of Allah for millions of years, because the angels kept thanking him, praising him. He kept doing sajda, he kept praying. When did he see his true nature? when the issue of Khilafat came about. إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. He thought this was my right, why was someone else given? And I will add to this and say, you will not know whether you are driven by your ego when you take a position of authority. You will only know it when you come down from that position of authority and lose it. Because it is at that point we have attached ourselves to it and we are threatened by it. So these kind of an experiences, now, if I become that, then I limit myself. This is my potential. Some people will say, this is just, our people. How many times you hear it says, oh, we Khojas, we never grow out of this. Or we Indians, we never, we Muslims, we're just like this. Somebody once told me, we Indians, we're just like crabs. Like, we're just like crabs? What makes us like crabs? He says, don't you see when you go to the fish market or you go to the pet store, the other animals, they cover the top so the animals can't get out? But the crabs, they don't cover them, they leave it open. I say, why? He says, because crabs cannot see anyone go forward. As soon as one of the crabs starts crawling, the other one will pull him down. Sit where you're going. So we are like crabs. We don't need anyone to destroy us. We just pull our own selves down. So we do this, we say, oh, we are just like this. Let me tell you something, it is not us only. You go to a church, you go to a synagogue, you go to a Jamaat Khana, you go to a Sikh temple, you go to a Hindu temple, you go to a Shia mosque, anywhere you go. This problem you will find everywhere, because most human beings are caterpillars, they are not butterflies. So they are driven by fear. They are driven by the need to survive. Survival is key to them. But what I want to end by saying is that when you see this, don't say this is human nature. This is not human nature, this is animal nature. This is instinct, this is survival, this is tabi'ah, this is not fitra. Fitra does not care about this. Fitra is a butterfly. A butterfly soars in the heavens and dances in the sun. It does not care about those little worms in the small patch in the backyard who are fighting and saying, this is my rotting leaf, why are you sitting on my leaf? This is my corner of the mud, why are you on my corner of the mud? Fitra is an oak tree. It is singing the praise of its Lord and talking to the gardener and enjoying his love. It is not the little flower pot in the greenhouse that is saying, why is this flower pot in front of me, or why is this flower pot on a higher rack and I'm on a lower rack. That is for tabi'i people. You will not find this in people of fitra. So people of fitra are not greedy for reward. They are not greedy for status. They are not greedy for position. These discussions, these talks, my dear brothers and sisters, are not to hurt anyone's feelings, and nor are they targeted to any individual or center. I have traveled the world and I have seen this in all parts of the world. These are to help us see our own selves before we die, so that we assess ourselves and say, am I driven by tabi'ah or am I driven by fitra? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I think this is enough for tonight, inshallah. We stop here and we continue tomorrow night, inshallah. If you can recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali. Tonight is the fourth night of Muharram al-Haram. We continue remembering Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And as we draw closer to the day of Ashura, we also come closer to Karbala. Our hearts move from where we are and take us closer and closer. Our imagination takes us there. We begin to feel as if we were there. The love of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein is part of our fitra. It is not part of our tabi'ah. There is a hadith in which Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says when Imam Hussein was a young boy, he one day took him and placed him on his lap, and then he talked to the people about his grandson. And he said, Inna liqatl al-Hussein hararatun fi qulub al-mu'minin. La tabrudu abada. In the hearts of the believers, there is a burning passion for Hussein that will never cool. Never, never. That is why you speak to a man who is even 70, 80 years old. He has heard the masa'ib of Abu Abdullah year after year after year, but every year it is fresh, because it is a blood that does not dry. A man asked the sixth Imam alayhi salam once, he said, Yabna Rasulillah, didn't your Jad, the Messenger of Allah, say, Mathalu Ahlul Bayti ka mathali safinatun Nuh. My Ahlul Bayt are like the ark of Nuh. Whoever comes on board will be saved, and whoever turns away will drown. He said, yes, my grandfather indeed said that. He said, then why did your grandfather also say, Inna al-Husayn misbahul huda wa safinatun najat? That Hussein is a lamp of guidance and an ark of salvation. Why specifically Hussein is an ark of salvation when the whole Ahlul Bayt is like the ark of Nuh? And Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam said, Kulluna sufunun najat. All of us are arks of salvation. Walakinna safinat al-Husayn awsa' wa asra'. But the ark of Hussein is wider, more spacious, and it moves faster. On the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein alayhi salam at one point was seen looking at the enemies and weeping. And people knew he was not afraid of dying. They said to him, Aba Abdullah, why do you weep? He said, I'm weeping for these people. Abki liqawmin yadkhuluna an-nara fiyya. I am crying for a people who will go to hell because of me. Where will you find a man? His brother's arms have been severed. His nephew has been trampled. His Akbar has been killed. His baby has been killed. He is crying for his enemy that they should go to the fire of hell because of me.